Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your overview of the Ex Machina, the Complete Series Omnibus from DC Comics. So this is the latest printing. Let's go ahead and take a look at it together. So here we have the latest printing of the Ex Machina Omnibus. This originally came out, I think, in 2018. I'm not quite sure. I think it was 2017, 2018, whenever they did it. And I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that one had the Wildstorm logo still. And I'll explain why here in a little bit. You have Brian K. Vaughan, Tony Harris, Ex Machina, the Complete Series Omnibus, and then, of course, the character of Mitchell right there. One of the 10 best novels of the year. So some blurbs about the book. And down here, you also have the inkers and colorists. You have Tom Feister, Jim Clark, and J.D. Metler. On the spine here, you have the Ex Machina logo. And Vaughan, Harris, Feister, Clark, and Metler. And then 100 right there. And the DC logo down there. And all the pieces, of course, done by Tony Harris. The mayor wore a jetpack, and that is pretty much the pitch for this book. The ISBN and $150. This book is rated 17 plus, mainly due to the language and violence in here. Now, this has been previously collected before in a series of course, single issues and trade paperbacks, and in these 5 deluxe editions. And you notice that these had the Wildstorm logo, and that's because that was the imprint that Ex Machina was published under. So even though it's part of DC, or it was part of DC, well, I guess they still are. Whenever Jim Lee sold the Wildstorm Studios to DC Comics still used the Wildstorm label as an imprint. Kind of like Vertigo, what they were doing with Vertigo. So you still had titles like Wildcats, and you had Stormwatch, and then eventually The Authority, that were under the Wildstorm label. Now everything is DC. Except for Elseworlds. And then I've heard a rumor that they're bringing back Vertigo. But hey, whatever. But yes, all of this, believe it or not, is collected in this omnibus. And for some reason, yours truly did not upgrade to the omnibus in 2017. And I don't know, or 2018. I don't remember why. But this is the way that I had them collected for years. Underneath the dust jacket, let's look at the flaps here first. You have a picture of Mitchell, and then the creators, Brian K. Vaughan and Tony Harris. That's actually from the book itself. And this amazing art on board by Tony Harris, featuring, I guess, yeah, these would be your main characters of Mitchell and Kremlin and Bradbury. Now, we are going to open this up. I'm going to give you the pitch and talk about a little bit of the story in here without going too much into spoilers, but pretty much what sets up the stories that are in here, because this is a big book. I'm going to talk about what's collected in here and show off the artwork, and then, of course, look at the build of the book. Okay, let's go ahead and get this book open. These gears are what your end sheets are, the gear patterns, which is right here, the Ex Machina Complete Series Omnibus. And, of course, that's a play on the words Deus Ex Machina. And actually, I think that's how it starts. Brian K. Vaughan, Tony Harris are the main creators of this book. You have John Paul Leon, Chris Sprouse doing some of the specials. Tom Feister and Jim Clark are your inkers. And then you have John Paul Leon inking his own stuff. J.D. Metler is the colorist with a couple of other colorists here. And Jared K. Fletcher is your letterer with Wes Abbott. There is an introduction here by Brian K. Oh, no, actually, this is an introduction by Brad Meltzer from 2008. I want to say around that time is when he was writing the Justice League series right after Infinite Crisis. And your dedications here on the left-hand side. You know, some of these are just to their editors or friends, but some of them really hit close to the heart. For my mother, Darlene, I miss you, J.D. Metler. And we kick off with issue number 1. There it is, yeah. Deus Ex Machina, and it explains what it is. Literally, God from the machine. Now, what's collected in here is Ex Machina issues 1 through 50 and the Ex Machina special 1 through 4. So there were 4 different specials that featured different, well, I guess focusing on different characters. And it begins in a really interesting way because we meet the character of Mitchell Hundred. And this is during the time that he has been mayor of New York City. But it's kind of a work that goes back and forth a lot. So you got to get used to that. And it all really features around the years like the late 90s and the early aughts. So he's talking about how the story begins and how it ends. And he's talking about something horrible that happened in 2005, which eventually they do get to. But I love the fact that he's looking at his life and he said it may seem like a comic, but it's really a tragedy. So he's that kind of tragic hero that we're going to be looking at. And immediately we go to a flashback when he's with his mom, and you learn that his father had taken off and left him with his single mom, and she's highly a political figure, like she's into politics. And the father figure that he does have is this gentleman named Ivan Tereshkov, which goes by the name Kremlin, who will become a big part of his life. And as you're reading through here, you jump back and forth between the flashbacks and present, or not even present day, just whatever time they say it is. Like this is Wednesday, January 9th, 2002, when he's being sworn into office. And what is going on? Why is his face glowing? And he's able to stop this gunman from shooting him and assassinating him. And then you go back to the late 90s, where you find his origin. And what it is that somehow he is able to absorb this power, this ability from this machinery that may have fallen from space. It could be some kind of experimental thing, or it could be from another dimension device. Whatever it is, this device at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge blows up, and shards of it land on his face and his hands. Now, that looks horrific, but what this does is this opens up the ability to talk to and communicate with machines. So not just talk to machines and control them, but later on you find out that he can actually listen to the machines and they talk to him, and that's a really unique power. So, like most people that grew up, I'm sure you probably noticed that he was here hanging out with his mom and he's reading a comic book. Warlord! That's the omnibus. Oh, look, that guy that looks like Warlord. Would love that omnibus, but he's inspired to become a superhero because he knows that he has this ability to talk to machines. So, of course, Kremlin, like I mentioned, being his father figure, helps him create this costume. And he goes by the name of the Great Machine. Now, the Great Machine isn't really accepted by society, right? Most people think that he's putting people in jeopardy. They really don't know what he is. He could be a supervillain. He could be a terrorist. And it's not until a little bit later into his superhero career that the Great Machine is actually respected. And so what ends up happening is that you find out, again through a series of flashbacks, that his superhero career he put on the back burner to focus on a political career after 2001, September 11th of 2001. So this isn't really our world because there's no superheroes in here. It's not the DC universe because it's not even the Wildstorm universe. There's no Wildcats or the characters from Stormwatch in here or the Authority. But it is very similar to our world because September 11th happened. And he mentions that if he was any kind of superhero, he would have been able to stop the first plane from crashing into the tower. So he was able to stop the second plane and stop everything else. And that kind of elevated his popularity. So he took advantage of that and rose to political power. Which, as I mentioned, his mother was kind of big into politics and raised him that way. So he's using that as a way to become mayor of New York. Like, it was before the thing that happened on September 11th, like the way that his numbers were looking, there was no way he was going to win. But after that, the popularity rose so much that he did end up winning. Now, is that where he's going to stop? You can find out for yourself if he goes back to becoming the Great Machine or if he wants to excel in politics and become something more than just mayor, perhaps governor, perhaps president. But you are witnessing here at the very beginning him talking to somebody, and this all comes full circle later on about the years in service that he had as mayor of New York City and what happened in 2005. And all of that is revealed later on. And let's talk about some of the other characters that show up through here. So you have his best friend, which is Rick Bradbury. He's a retired U.S. Marine, and he's kind of like his right-hand guy. He doesn't go anywhere. He's kind of like his bodyguard. So it helps that it's his best friend. And I mentioned Kremlin, who, like I said, plays a big role, not as only as a father figure, but also kind of like his Alfred, mixed with Harold, the guy that makes the machinery for him. You have a couple of other people in here, like Commissioner Angotti, who's the police commissioner of New York City, and doesn't really trust the Great Machine at first. And of course, that's in the series of flashbacks. You have this gentleman right here. This is David Wiley, who's his deputy mayor, and also becomes his really good friend. And even though Mitchell doesn't really listen to everything his advisors tell him, such as hiring this young lady right here, and that is Journal Moore. She's a City Hall intern, and now she's the special advisor to I think it's like Young Affairs or something like that. It would be like somebody in office hiring somebody in college to come and tell them, this is what the kids are doing, this is what the kids are TikToking or Snapchatting. I don't know what the hell they do these days. I try to keep up with my kids. I think TikTok is still a thing, right? That's the thing right now. Maybe not. I don't know. X? What's that? No. Anyway, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Maybe I need my own special advisor on Young Affairs. You do get flashbacks of his mom, and his mom has actually a big dark secret that opens up this like holy crap moment to not just the character of Mitchell, but also the reader. Like, wait, should we how do I word this without spoiling it? Can this woman really be trusted to guide Mitchell in the right direction, right? Even though she's the one that raised him. So let's talk about some villains, because in this world, I said there are no superheroes. There are mainly crimes being committed, like burglary, and of course, assassination attempts and terrorist attacks. But you do have some supervillains through here. You have this guy named Jack Ferson. Here, let me show you. Who has a very similar ability to Mitchell's, but he can talk to animals. And I think he was just like a sound technician that got the ability to talk to animals. Very similar to the way that Mitchell can talk to machines. But did it come from the same place? There's also a couple of other characters that appear through here. Like the character of Trouble that actually is inspired by the Great Machine to wear a costume and become sort of a villain. And her origin story is so ridiculous that when you read it, you're like, really? That's the reason why? And then there are people that, see him as an inspiration, that go the other route, that want to be superheroes, that also want to help out. Like the character of the automaton. And that's all I will say about the characters. Now, the thing that I fell in love with, and the reason I picked this up, was because I'm a big fan of Tony Harris's artwork. I loved his art in Starman and severely missed him when he left the book. In this, he uses a very similar style to Starman. I mean, by now, he's evolved his style. He still uses the very same photo references, so he takes pictures of him and his friends, and he uses them as photo references, so much so that, here, I'll show you in a little bit, he wears these ridiculous helmets, and has his friends like pose in ridiculous poses, kind of like what Alex Ross does in a very similar style. But he's been doing that for years. And there is an issue, like I talked about, where him and Brian K. Vaughan actually show up in here. But is it really them, or is it people that look like them? And what the hell are they doing here? Well, you can find out for yourself. I mean, this is a big book. It's all 50 issues and the 4 specials. One of the things you probably notice as I'm flipping through here is that there is no table of contents, and the issue numbers are not marked. You just jump right in, you get the cover, and it's a textless cover. You don't see what issue it is, and you jump right into the story. So that is something that, from time to time we see in Omni collections, and I know some people love to know what chapter they're on, what issue they're on, and this is one that just, you experience the story like it's a big novel. There are chapter breaks in here that are separated by textless covers. Now, the last thing I want to say before we talk about the extras, we look at the back matter, is that, this is a book that I think some people are turned off with because it's got the word political thriller in there. But it really reads more like, I guess it's sort of like The West Wing, if you think about that, like, or season 3 of The Wire. I don't know why I think it's such a great political thriller, but it always has been in my book. It's kind of like that. But that's just one aspect of this book. There's also the human aspect, these connections, this drama, right? Like, won't they, will they? Mitchell himself is a very complex character. Grew up without a father. His father figure has his own problems. And even the women that he's with, you don't know who to trust exactly. And by the time you get to the last volume, the last fifth of this book, because I separate them by different books since I have all 5 of the oversized hardcovers, I didn't even talk about that part because I want people to be surprised. You're left wondering, like, is Mitchell as good a person as I think that he is, or is he doing this for selfish reasons? And it's one of those things that you ask yourself with politicians anyway, right? Can there be anybody that you trust? And you will have very similar questions here. And the third thing about this book is that it's full of action. Every issue has lots of action in there. And I think I just flipped through some, like, sex scenes. They have very limited sex scenes, like nothing gratuitous or anything. But there is lots of action in here. Every issue has either a flashback where he's learning to fly, a la Rocketeer style, or he's learning to control his powers, or he's learning a new part of his powers, a new ability, or he's fighting some kind of psycho, some nemesis, some new villain. Every issue is full of that. So it's kind of broken up into 3 different parts. And yeah, that's what I will say about this book. Don't be turned off just because one of them is a political thriller, and I get it, right? You see enough of that in real life. You don't want to read about it. But there's a lot more to it than just that. That's just one layer. Looking at the back matter, we see that there's a pitch here. You get some early sketches from Tony Harris. You get the breakdown of what Ex Machina is, the pitch right here. And then but some of it has changed a little bit by the time you get to the final issue, or the finished issues rather. The characters, so you get the Honorable Mayor Hundred, which we talked about, Deputy Mayor Wiley, Commissioner Angotti there, Rick Bradbury, and Journal Moore, who are not pictured here. I wonder why. There is Kremlin, and we didn't even talk about Susan X. Who is that lady? Well, you can find out for yourself. And then the stories, but I think this just goes through the first 10 issues, yeah. And then the process, the interior page showcasing. Now, there's a couple of things I want to say, too. There are some derogatory terms in here that are being used, and there's animal abuse. So if you can't stomach those things, this is not for you. And I know that some people are like, why is he even saying that? What the hell, man? There are people that kind of stuff bothers, so I try to be as thorough as possible with my overviews. This is the photo references that he uses, so he takes a picture of him and his friends or a model, and he draws them pretty much is what he does. And he's been doing that for years. See what I mean? Like, he put on those ridiculous goggles, and of course adds to the artwork, right? He's been doing that since the pages of Starman. So you have photo references to sketches, to inks, to colors. And there's that amazing double-page spread. I'm sure he probably, like, if people take pictures of him, he looks so ridiculous. It's a 2-cover combination of issues 48 and 49. And then the concepts and photos again. And these are the trade paperbacks, which had original artwork, I believe. I know the hardcovers did, so I hope they're back here. Yeah, okay. The hardcovers are back here. Hey, look at those two guys. Or no, those two guys. That kind of looks like Tony Harris. So, yeah, he did put the covers here. Awesome, awesome. I'm glad when they're included that. The variant cover by Jim Lee. There's a couple pages in here, and I mean literally a couple pages by Jim Lee in this particular collection. And the script to sketches and pencils. I love when this stuff is added in here. And the biography on the creators, including Jean-Paul Leon, who did one of the specials, and Chris Sprouse. Let's look at the binding. 1,440 pages, and it is sewn binding. I'm sure you probably noticed that there's a little bit of gutter loss towards the beginning, but that's kind of to be expected with a book this big. But that is some really good, like, that's a good eye. I figure for a book this big, the eye wouldn't be as big, but you need it to be that big in order to have the pages fold down the way you need them to. And let's see here. Paper stock is same paper stock they've been using for the last couple of months, I've noticed. It's gotten just a little bit thinner, but there's really no bleed through coming from the opposite page for these, at least that I've noticed. And I do look for those things, just because I know some viewers of mine need to know if there is any bleed through. But no, there doesn't appear to be. And I wanted to come back to this double page spread at the end to show you exactly what kind of gutter loss there is. So there is very, very minimal. Holding it down like that, you can see the whole picture. But that's it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this book. Let me know in the comments down below if you have picked it up in the past, or if you're picking it up on a complete blind buy because you're a fan of either Tony Harris or Brian K. Vaughan, or you just like omnis. Or if you're keeping your oversized hardcovers or trade paperbacks or single issues, and what you thought about the run. Leave all those comments down below. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.